Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to moderate this roundtable on education of populations in risk prevention in Europe. This roundtable will be in English. To train in first aid on how to deal with a disaster is not a priority in most European countries. While Scandinavia and Germany are quite advanced in this area, the situation is unequal throughout Europe. But the EU, which only issues recommendations, wants to develop a culture of risk among citizens. So what is at stake? What are the priorities? And how can we benefit also from the experience of countries that already have developed this culture? So to discuss and debate over these questions, I'm happy to welcome 5 guests. Dr. Pascal Cassan, welcome. You're the honorary president of Secours Expo 2022, director of the World Center for First Aid, emergency physician, and also national medical advisor of the French Red Cross. Next to you, we have Captain Servan-Carré. Welcome. You're coming from the Ministry of Interior. We're happy to have a representative of the state, French government. You work for the fire department and aid in civilian security, safety. Next to you, the only woman, no, Professor Bottiger, because we changed. Professor Bottiger, welcome. You're the treasurer of the European Resuscitation Council, the ERC. You're also head of the Department of Anesthesiology and Intensive Care Medicine University Hospital of Cologne in Germany. Thank you for being with us. Here we come to our only woman on this roundtable, Miss Mercedes Aguirre. Good afternoon. You're the coordinator in disaster risk reduction projects at the French Red Cross. And we're ending this presentation with Professor Pierre Carly. Welcome. You're chairman of National Board of Hospital Emergencies and also chairman of the EMS of Paris, le SAMU de Paris. Welcome, everyone. So in the first part, we will see why citizens should be involved in first aid. And the second part will be to talk about something wider, emergency and disaster medicine. So the first part, my question is for you, Dr. Cassan. Why should citizens be involved in this field, in the health chain? Isn't it the job of health professionals?
Yeah, it's the most important question we have in this field, and it's very clearly that everywhere, probably in Europe, we have a very efficient emergency services. But if we have an emergency services very efficient, if we have not the first link of the chain of survival, this service can do nothing. We know that we need time to arrive on the spot. And if a cardiac arrest arrives, but not just cardiac arrest, but we can imagine all situation of domestic accidents, fire or some other accidents. If the citizen don't know what to do during the 7-10 minutes where the emergency service is not here, probably it will be a disaster. Probably a disaster for the family, because we know that for cardiac arrest is more than 70% of the cardiac arrest which occur in the domestic area with the family. And for sure, we can't have a doctor or we can't have a nurse or a first aider behind each citizen, for sure. And we need for that that the first hand who help the casualty must be probably somebody of the family, but perhaps a colleague if we are on the workstation, and probably on the street also if it's possible. That's the real problem.
Mm-hmm. Professor Botiger, you've dedicated years of work to develop a CPR training for children. Why is that? Is it also the role of children to have, the burden of being responsible for someone's survival?
If we agree that first aid education is important to all of us and to all citizens, and if we see that, as Pascal mentioned, cardiac arrest is the most important urgency, even in countries where we have very, very good out-of-hospital emergency medical services, it takes 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, sometimes more until they arrive. And in sudden cardiac arrest, sudden cardiac death, which is the third leading cause of death in our so-called civilized nations, this is too long because the brain starts to die after 3 to 5 minutes after the collapse. So you need to have in every family, because in most of the cases it occurs at home, you need to have in every family lifesaver. And the easiest way to get this is to educate school children. You can even start in the kindergarten.
Aren't they too young?
Pardon?
They're not too young?
If they are 3 years old, they are probably too young, but if they are 4 years old, they can do check for signs of life and call the emergency services. Mm-hmm. And if they are 10 years old, they also can do cardiac compressions. And the most important thing is they need to learn it before high puberty, because then they have other things in their minds. And in Germany we had, maybe also in other countries, in France you have it, in Germany it is obligatory to have a first aid course before you get your driving license. But this is too late. People forget 3 weeks after everything. But if children are learning it, they have a lot of empathy and enthusiasm. And then it is for them as swimming or bicycling. They will never forget, even if they are not doing it for 30 years. And, last sentence, we also use the children as multiplayers, because when we educate school children in CPR, and fortunately we have since 2015 the support of the World Health Organization for that, so they recommend it worldwide. If they have educated, you can teach school children in 3 minutes how to do CPR. We use regularly 2 hours, and then we say to them, you now know how to save a life. The only thing you need is 2 hands. Please go to your family, to your friends, and show them how easy it is to save a life. And within the next 2 weeks, you need to educate by yourself 10 further people in your family and around your friends. Write their names on a list and bring it back to your teacher. And that is the way how we use them as multipliers.
I see. If we talk about Germany, how many Germans now are trained for that? If you talk about kids and adults,
we have. You
have a figure?
It's more or less as in most of the other European countries. We also have in Germany a suggestion from the school ministers, but only a few Bundesländer, a few countries in Germany are really on the spot, and we are still a developing country with this. We are not as good as Scandinavia or the Netherlands, unfortunately, but we are working on this. And we just came out with a petition, so we used social media and influencers to get 50,000 signatures within 3 weeks, 50,000 signatures, because we want to go to the German government so that they make it mandatory to have school children educated in CPR, and maybe in 2-3 years from now we are better than we are now, hopefully.
Okay, so we understand it's a slow process also within the German culture, among the public.
It is really very hard to reach this goal, although everyone says it's nice, it's good. right-wing, left-wing, central-wing parties all agree, all religions agree, young people and older people agree, and nevertheless it is so hard to reach this goal.
Why is that?
Why is that?
In your opinion?
I mean, in Germany, I have the numbers from Germany, but for Europe, you just have to multiply this by 5 times or so. In Germany, we have 70 through 100,000 deaths by sudden cardiac arrest every year, and only 5,000 to 7,000 survive. It would be very easy to save an additional 10,000 lives every year, but no one is doing anything really hard to reach that goal. On the other side, if you are looking to traffic accidents, last year, also due to Corona, we had less than 3,000 traffic accidents in Germany. The deaths, not traffic accidents, but deaths by traffic accidents. And we have invested billions of euros in safety in cars, in traffic, on the streets, in our minds, but not in a much more important healthcare issue, which is first aid and sudden cardiac arrest. And the reason...
You don't have an explanation?
My very rude explanation is you cannot earn money with this. With the cars, it's different. You earn a lot of money with this. And here, it's only about life and death. And no one cares, really. And we need to change this in our world.
Captain Carré, when you hear the experience of Germany and the fact that it's a very slow movement on the level of the country itself and the government, what do you have to say in France? We don't see CPR in schools.
Well, I totally agree with the fact that a slow process. As for France, some years ago, back in the past, in 2004, there was a law which was voted by the French Parliament. Sorry, it was aiming the modernization of civil safety, and the main pattern in this law was to make civil safety everyone's business. But
what happened since the law? Not much, no?
Sorry?
Not much happened since the law was voted.
Back to the present years, after the terrible terrorist attacks in 2015, the French president of the Republic announced in 2017 his will to get 80% of the French population being able to make some first aid gestures, and so the Ministry of Interior worked with the Ministry of National Education, and from this start there was kind of a progressive program from the youngest one to the eldest one. Yes, the how can I say? The small one are involved with how to call, how to make a call, for example, how to get some
emergency call. Okay.
Yes, and from that, it was included in the educational continuum by the Ministry of National Education, and so it was getting it was increasing for the last years, but obviously regarding the last 2 years, it was stopped.
Is it mandatory? Is it mandatory in school? Is it to all?
Yes, it is.
Schools have to implement that.
In terms of first aid gestures, yes, it is actually. As I said, with the progressive programs according to the age of people.
Professor Carly, why citizens should be involved in this process of the health system? What's at stake?
Well, I'll try to explain that indeed in the field of cardiac arrest, but even more than that. And the first point, as Bern and Pascal said, and the captain said also, it's buying time during CPR to improve prognosis and survival. Okay, that's extremely important, but it's more than that. The fact that we can use citizens that will be involved in the early management of a victim makes a huge difference in the position he will have in the future. Clearly, by being involved, he is no more a spectator. He is an actor. That means he will do something that will provide care to another. And that's extremely important.
Why?
Because in most of our European society that are, in many places, welfare state, the state thinks about everything. People must know that sometimes they have to do it by themselves, with the others, but by themselves at first. So let's say that education of the population is the first step to action. That's not all. The second step is resilience. If you do something, you have no more a victim. And that's the second example we can discuss after if you want. It's about the terrorist attack. For example, in France in 2015, during the terrorist attack, the problem is to convert people that are soft target for terrorists, that are clearly potential victims, to people that are able to give the alert, to clearly spot the terrorist, to act and stop the bleeding by performing very simple life-saving procedures. And then after that, they are able to face the fact that they have been attacked, and consequently, they develop quickly resilience. So cardiac arrest, natural disaster indeed COVID also, but terrorist attack is a good example. This makes a strong link between the first and the last link of any change trying to save or to improve survival of people. So that's why it's extremely important. And as it has been said, in Europe it's not so simple because there are a lot of programs, there are a lot of national programs, but the impact slowly decreases. And afterward there is another major event, everybody say we have to do, the president, the authorities will do it. I think we have to do this in several dimensions. One will be the state, that means producing law, producing public money, but also to do that with only the population, that means private initiative, and the one that will be the good one, they must be integrated to the state organization indeed. But they begin by people wanting to do something else, to do more, and clearly that's a system, a way of thinking about difficult and very, let's say, emotional event for everybody, differently, and consequently being globally more strong together.
So you're talking, yes, level of state regulation, level of culture and educate people. And I guess it has to work both ways. But
yes, and I see that from my point of view, which is at the extremely top of the management of the victims or the patient. Like Bern, we work in a critical care unit, in medicalized EMS. So that's really the last link. And the others are extremely important. We do not exist if the other links are not extremely efficient. And the result for the society, for what we think about our society, will be poor if these links are not developed, even if we are the best and we can provide extremely sophisticated medicine. That's not enough.
you said it would be poor. Why would it be poor if we don't go all the way?
It will be poor because the cardiac arrest will stay forever a plague that kills young people without any chance of survival, fatality. We will be poor because we were not able to fight against aggressors in our country and unable to mobilize. And the result will be politically, socially, and technically poor. That's why. So clearly, involvement, initial involvement, means that we initiate something big that will become more and more sophisticated, more and more efficient. And this works in Germany, this works sometimes in France, it works in other countries in the north of Europe, as you say, Bern, because they have that in their mind for hundreds of years. So clearly we need to be more involved in that area.
Mercedes Aguerre, if we, to have a bit of height on the European level, if we look at the European map, where do we stand regarding risk prevention and first aid and people being involved? Can you give us a little overview?
Yes, well, I think that it has to be with first aid. Dr. Cassin is going to be able to better respond to that question. But regarding, I would like to go back a little bit what the captain said actually about the law in 2004, that it has to be also in relation with the European countries. That a big difference is that it's still in France. We have a system where it's still professionalized. And that's a big difference between how it is called civil safety, civil protection, and civil defense. There is an European mechanism of civil defense, European mechanism of civil protection. And actually, they are making training course, and I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to participate, and we were discussing this. And actually, what I think it is very important, what he had just said, is that we don't put the people at the center of the response, in the sense that we are not giving maybe the tools, the correct tools. We're not adapting the tools in the way that people could receive this tool. And actually, the thing about still calling civil safety, it gave us that idea. When we are calling civil protection, it's because we are actually putting the people in the center of the system. And there are differences, of course, of we and where are depending. Here, for example, civil protection depends from civil safety depends from the Ministry of Interior. In another countries, as Ireland, it depends from the Ministry of Defense. So this is because a traditional tendency they have, but also gives an idea how the system is going to be in each country as well. And well, that was on the regarding how are we approaching communities. The important is actually how, and now the Ministry of Ecology here in France has published an action plan that we have all to be resilient. And what they're saying in this action plan that they have done a very interesting review about the risk of culture, that they're calling it the culture of resilience, is that actually the tools are not pedagogical enough and they're not interested enough for the general public. So that's why maybe I do agree that maybe there's a financial interest as well, but at the same time, we're not using the correct tools to approach to the citizens.
Okay, what do you have to say to that, Captain? We don't use the right tools to involve citizens. They're not at the center of the protection and health system.
Well, I'll use maybe with another part, another side of the topic, not necessarily on first aid measures or first aid gestures, but for example, in terms of education or sensibilization and on how to behave in case of fire sceneries, for example. So actually there's a European program coming from the European Commission. So there are a lot of actors working on the project actually, and the first remark, the first thing that we can see is how to compare a country to another one. And for example, in terms of fire sceneries, Well, the way to build is different from a country to another one. The way to the rules that are applied on how to build are also different from one country to another one. And the first thing that is being worked is okay. We all have to speak the same language. So I mean, in terms of terminology, in terms of methodology, also. So we must all be able to exchange, to compare with each other. So in terms of tools, for example, the first step, the first necessary step is how to make some how to make things comparative from a country to another one.
To have like common standards.
Yes, that's.
Okay.
We are actually working on this with. You can check on the internet. That is called EU Fire Stats. So the aim is to make stats which can be compared from each other. But the final step is obviously how to make public policies. Years later, of course, but that's actually what we are working at.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Casson, can you give us an overview on the situation in terms of first aid throughout Europe?
About Europe, but we can compare with the rest of the world also. It's very clear that France is on the middle of the scale. We are not the baddest, but we are not the best, for sure. And we see the situation in Europe that some countries are more involved in the citizen education. It's the case of the north part of Europe, especially. Why? Because I think they began before us, and also they think about the education as a long life learning. Probably is missing that in France, and we know that, for example, in Germany, they are beginning very early. And it's very small guys who are learning just how to ask for an adult in case of an accident, and perhaps if they are 4 years old, able to go to the telephone and to use the telephone. And that's very important to begin at 2-4 years. Why not? And of course to continue all during the life. And that's the problem for France. Probably the citizen doesn't understand that probably if he has something to do, it will be for somebody of his or her family and not for a stranger. Because it's the phantasm of the citizen. Oh, if I have something to do in first aid, it will be for a stranger. We know that's not true. It will be probably for a colleague or for a member of the family. Of course, possibly it will be for a stranger, but it's not real. And I think that this effort we need, especially in France, because we have to talk in France, but probably in many Latin countries, because we can see that that's the spirit of Latin country waiting for the state. We don't take in charge our health. We are responsible of our family, and if I'm a father, if I'm a mother, I need to know how to save life, and perhaps not. We have not to take to talk about cardiac arrest every time, but just an hemorrhage or a burn. It's very important for parents to know what to do, and probably if we begin with the young people, it will be the open door to the family. It's because we need to do that. We make effort in France for sure, and we try to do, and especially in schools, we know that many teachers really are involved now in teaching. But of course, you need time, and you need money, and sometimes is a lack. But I think if we compare 20 years ago, and of course Professor Carly and Professor Bottinger was here 20 and perhaps 30 years before, and we were during this period not so good that we are today, and I think it's positive. I think we are on the good way. It's increasing, but it takes time. Of course, it's not magic, and we need to educate the population, and it's really a changing mind. And that's very difficult.
And how do we operate, Professor Kali, how do we operate this change of mind? We don't see any campaigns, public campaigns talking about this. So people don't think about these, gestures and so on, because we never hear about it.
So clearly the problem is why I do something if there is no benefit for me? Why I have to be involved if there is no benefit for me? You can say it's a global benefit. That's intellectual. But clearly, the fact that there is no, let's say, no things that push you forward to do it is it's difficult to explain. However, if we consider cardiac arrest or any other disease, there will be a possibility in that to say that instead of only a global benefit, you will have a personal benefit. That benefit is the prevention. If you are trained, even as a volunteer, to take care, provide first aid to a cardiac arrest patient, then you understand that cardiac arrest exists, first point. Second point, that cardiac arrest is a very severe disease that kills 97% of persons if we do not provide immediate CPR. Well, that's always true. And then you will think about, it may happen to me. And maybe the fact that I have been heard in Purple AF prevention, not too much salt, not too much fat, no sport, things like that, they begin to be real. The realistic point of view of the disease make the people more aware of the need of the prevention, and consequently, it pushes them to be more efficient in terms of healthcare, health-being, and so on. So I think it's an important point. So that works very well with cardiac arrest and coronary artery disease. Does it work? Does it work with other examples we have taken today? I will say that the example of fire rescue and the possibility to be involved in a fire and to know what to do clearly will also develop the prevention of fire in your home, in your workplace, and so on. People that have been trained, that have been educated, they will say this happens. And the fact that we can connect to be an actor with I'm also an actor of the prevention is clearly a benefit. So I think that's an idea. It works also for terrorist attack, not very well, because you cannot say I will become a specialist in intelligence, in detecting, but that's a possibility. You cannot say I will be trained to shoot any. No. But it's more global. But this can be done also in several other examples. For example, natural disaster, I think it's really important. If you have been informed, if you have been educated to the fact that there will be no possibility of communication, that you will be lacking of any life, let's say, provision of everything you need for life, medication and so on, if you are in a place that can be exposed, clearly the fact that you have been trained will also immediately convert in the possibility to prevent being in a very, very dangerous situation. So I think that's one of the motors we can use for the population, the motors that it's indeed for the others immediately, but at the end, you are one of the others.
Okay, you have a great campaign right here. So, Captain Carré, we need some campaigns, public campaigns, to speak out about this issue. Otherwise, we don't think about it at all.
Yeah, as Dr. Casson said previously, that's always the same reason. How about the money? How about the lack of money for such campaigns? So, I mean, I'm totally aware of the importance of the topic, but that's still the same. So that's the reason why we identified schools. I mean, the process from the youngest one to the eldest one, because that's a cheap way to educate people, but that's also a universal way to reach every people from the class of an age class. Sorry, but regarding the way on how to educate people. It's interesting because during a long time, at least in terms of fire prevention, prevention was regarded and considered as the way how to make rules, how to build according to these rules, etc., etc. And some years ago, some local programs, some local programs appeared, and that's interesting. The way how the conception of prevention is actually moving from this past conception to the actual one. Sorry, and we are now trying to harmonize such local programs and trying to make them to kind of place them in new territories, and that's also the reason why public or private school, but I mean the education process. That's a very good way to reach people. That's an important way to reach all the people from class of age.
Dr. Casson, what about a campaign from the Red Cross? Where does the Red Cross?
I don't want to highlight just the Red Cross, but I think the lack we have in France, especially, is the lack of public campaign or collaboration of all the organization. Because it's a good example here. We are all together around the table, and unfortunately, if I see the situation in France, the last time we had a campaign was in 2000 by the Red Cross, the French Red Cross.
22 years ago.
And never I saw an action from other guys and other organization or the states. Involving the public, really, in the television or spots or publicity, and that's not the case. We need really all together, working together to highlight this importance and the communication. And for that, we have some events. First, we began with the World First Aid Day. The World First Aid Day is effectively
what is the day actually?
It's the second Saturday of September, and organized by the Red Cross and the Red Crescent movement, and all the national society are working together on the same time, with of course the jet lag, but the same day or the same week, they try to educate the public. Fortunately, in many countries, we have collaboration between Red Cross, states, other partners, other organizations. And I think it's very important because we have to convince the two extremity of the social scale. First, we have to convince the citizen, and for that we need communication, and we have to convince the politics. And that's very difficult because for sure the needs are not the same, and to convince the two extremity of the scale, social scale, probably for communicators it's not so easy. And last and not least, if we have the example of the World First Aid Day, we have also other organizations, and it's very clear that Bernd can explain us, but we have also a fantastic organization, which is the European Resuscitation Council, or began a good idea, and now it's worldwide, is Kids Save Lives. Kids Save Lives is really, and Bernd can explain more better than me what it is, because it's essential to have this action all around the world to mobilize the young population.
Yes, this campaign that you developed, Professor, could you tell us how it's developing? There's also the World Restart a Heart Day that's in October. What's happening then, and what results do you see there?
Yeah, we have established two campaigns. They sometimes they go together or they are mixed a little bit up. The Kids Save Lives campaign is, as I mentioned before, we started in Germany or in Europe during the European Resuscitation Council Congress 2009 in Cologne, where we have trained 400 school children in the town hall how to do CPR on mannequins. And this was in all the news in television in the evening, in all channels. And that was more or less the start. And then we said we need to, as I said before, we need to go into the schools and start at least at the age of 12 or so, before puberty, to educate them in CPR. And then during these days, we said children saving lives, and later on, we named it Kids Save Lives because it's more good wording or so.
Visual.
Kids Save Lives is a very nice wording. And then we went to the WHO, and they supported us since 2015. And the European Resuscitation Council is an umbrella organization for 33 national resuscitation councils. And we told them, please go to your parliament, to your ministries, and to all these legislative administrations, and convince them that this must be mandatory in schools. And in the meantime, this Kids Save Lives campaign has reached a status where we have it mandatory, school children education in CPR, in 6 European countries, and it is at least a suggestion in 23 additional European countries. And it's not only in Europe, but it's all over the world. For example, in the state of Sao Paulo in Brazil, the anesthesiologists over there made it possible that it's also a law there. And I was personally down for my first time in my life in South America, training small children from in favelas in CPR, and they are really very enthusiastic. So this is Kids Save Lives. And the World Restart a Heart Day was born in Europe when we thought in 2012 that cardiac arrest is such a major healthcare issue. 350,000 people are dying in Europe every year, although the emergency medical service are going to them, but they are arriving too late. If you put this another way around, this is 1,000 deaths per day.
That's huge.
In Europe. This is as if 2 jumbo jets would crash down every day in Europe without any survivors every day in the year. That's the healthcare issue. And we thought we must do something. And then we went to the European Parliament in Strasbourg and sampled signatures, and we got signatures from 400 members of the European Parliament, which is more than 50%, to establish a European Restart a Heart Day, which we then did in 2013. And again, with all these 33 national resuscitation councils, we put it in all the different European countries. And in 2018, we started to do this worldwide. And the biggest movement we had was in 2019, last year before the pandemic. We have trained 5.4 million lay people in CPR, and we have reached more than 200 million by social media and television and radio and so.
That's huge.
That's something at least.
Do you have a figure for like survival rates with CPR? Were you able to establish some statistics?
We know that in countries that are very enthusiastic in doing these kind of efforts, for example, Denmark, we all know, even if you're not a soccer fan, we know Christian Eriksen, who collapsed during the soccer game and was resuscitated immediately. This is happening 2,000 times, 2,000 times a day all over Europe. And he was lucky because he had trained people around, and he was able to post on Instagram in the afternoon because cardiac arrest is not a big issue if you immediately start CPR. And Denmark, this happens in Denmark. Denmark is a very good example because they started in 2001 with a national campaign, with the support of Her Royal Highness, with the support of the parliament. And within 10 years, they increased the lay resuscitation rate. Someone else is speaking here. Lay people starting resuscitation before the emergency medical service arrived, they increased it from 20% through about 50%, which is a huge effort in 10 years. It is possible to do so. We can learn this from Denmark. And in parallel, by this intervention, it was an intervention of the whole community in Denmark, they increased the survival rate from out-of-hospital cardiac arrest by 3-fold. And I mean, we have some doctors and some specialists here in the room. Does anyone know any intervention in a deadly entity that was able, in the last 50 years, to increase the survival rate by 3-fold? There are no drugs, there's no surgery, there is no intervention, there is nothing that compares to this. So this is just exceptional. That's just great. It does cost more or less nothing, and it helps many, many, many people in addition to survive.
Professor Carly, as the French correspondent of ERC, did you go and talk to the parliament members? Did you try to activate some public action?
Yeah, I think that Bernard has explained you that it was a movement created in Europe in order to have something that will be global around all the country or the community at the same time. Because as Bern said, the problem is to convince the politicians and globally the public opinion that it is clearly a plague, something that we can fight, and not only a normal life. People die because they live and they die. There are some of the events must not happen. And if they happen, we have to do all what we can in terms of improving survival. So the aim of the Restarter Day was to say that all the voices from Europe the same day at the same time, to make all government be involved in that. And in fact, it was a win-win situation, because it was good for Europe to say we do something more than only restricting the budget expenses. We can do something very positive. And the second point was also, on a national point of view, the fact that if it is European and it will save our lives or from our country, it will be something we can do and we can extend in all the possible dimensions. However, it's not so simple, but it's clearly a landmark. And I think our Restarter Day is a landmark, and in France, we do that. We have a meeting that day. We have also several possibilities in terms of showing how to trade, how to provide healthcare. To see that on the television, there is always one or two spots on that, and clearly it's a plus. But it's a long way to obtain a massive positive result. We know it is possible, but in our country, it's not so simple. I remind you that Denmark can do things really outstanding, but how many people in Denmark living?
6-point-something million.
6.5 million. That means half of the area here. So it's more simple to organize for 6.5 million than for 60 million or all the large European communities we are in. However, clearly, I think it's a plus. And I think also Bern is clearly undersizing his role in that and his role in the Kids Save a Life movement. I can tell you, because I'm also a member of the ERC for more than 20 years. I'm one of the founders of the ERC, in fact. I've been the chairman of the society, you remember, I think, Bern. But Bern has worked a lot on that. He has published papers, scientific evidences, test in one country or two countries. You have involved also the Chancellor of Germany and published the photo with her, as far as I remember. So it's clearly a everyday involvement in order to push forward, to improve the possibility of that everybody has to be involved. And I think it's a very positive result, but we have to continue. We cannot stop that. It's a continuing process. And what we hope in the future, it will be obvious for everybody that we have to know how to perform cardiac massage, how to read any ED, and so on, because we must not say it's exceptional. It has to be the standard. And clearly, we are progressing. And as it has been said before, 20 years ago it was science fiction, and now it's only a matter of quality and improvement. So that's, in a way, a positive result.
And we probably have to fight also against fear. And, you know, that's part of changing this culture. Fear of, am I capable of doing this gesture? Am I well trained? That's probably one of the also resistance, I would say. We're going to talk about a wider scale exceptional health situation or disaster medicine. In the second part, Mercedes Aguirre, how should citizens be involved and why, you know, in case of a natural disaster, and let's talk about the big issue that's concerning our planet, it's climate change. Today there's walks around France on climate change. Why should people be involved and how?
Well, it's quite a very important and very big question. We have seen actually that the latest report of the IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. The second one has recently been released and is saying actually that scientific evidence that human-induced actions are actually increasing climate change. So this is showing now that, for example, in particular, what are heat waves, for example, that are being more recent, more recent and more intense in the years. And we have particularly the example of in 2003 in France, well, in Europe, but everybody knows, that it was like a marking point a little bit that made a change. Because it also had many consequences. It has economical consequences. It has nature consequences, economical consequences, because farmers lost their cattle, and winery sector, for example, was really impacted as well. So all this was a changing point. And that, I think that Captain can better explain, but at that level, at national level, they decided to implement a national heatwave plan, and we at the French Red Cross, as auxiliary roles, our auxiliary role to the public authorities, we also make this plan at national level. We develop a heatwave plan, and that has, very vaguely speaking, I have different alert. It's an early warning system that is following a little bit also the national plan. And what we're doing in this case, we're trying, we have two priority groups, and what have to be the French Red Cross. First of all, we're targeting elder people and homeless peoples, and our actions are going to be mostly directly to these both groups.
What do you do then? What do you do with these people?
Well, in this case, what had happened, we increase our, what we call les marottes, the social patrols. And we increase all our interventions. I mean, for example, everything that has to do with the translation of people to hospital, those really increase, and our social patrols also increase, giving, for example, water to the people that are homeless, or giving caps, or giving city maps and where the water points are located, or distributing also food. So this kind of action has been
developed.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And this is a way that we have adapted to what it is climate change. Mm-hmm. We have adapted that well with this kind of plan with COVID-19, mm-hmm. because we have to adapt all the procedures and how to change or renew your protection personal mask or equipment, and when should we be doing these social patrons, not when it is the warmest hours. So we are adapting. What I believe that we have to adapt and innovate all the time when it comes to what it is natural risk and climate change. And of course we have to collaborate, because if not, we're not going to. All sectors are working in silos, and we have seen that during the COVID. Mm-hmm. And one of the things working in natural disaster is trying to make understand that it is a cross-cutting issue, that we're working in all sectors, and we cannot do it in only one sector, and we cannot do it alone. Mm-hmm. We have to all work together, all the stakeholders, from public authorities going to small association and private sector, of course, and scientific. Is really an effort of everybody. So we have to be continually adapting ourselves and our plans.
Captain Carré, yes, we do all have in mind the 2003 heat wave in France that killed over 10,000 people. What has been implemented by the government on that? We sometimes hear, when it's really hot in summertime, we hear messages on the radio, drink and be careful and don't stay too much in the heat and so on. How did this change then, from then?
To be honest, I'm not exactly specialized on this field, but as far as I know, I think that that will be also related to the Health Ministry and solidarities in terms of plans. I can't tell exactly for that, but I would like to. Regarding to what we said previously, when we talked about the mind or the necessary change of mind as in the relationship we have with such events, maybe that we had kind of. I don't know how to express it. I don't want to be rude, but some kinds of maybe. We used to regard to look at these events like kind of acceptable part, or I don't know how to express it, but I think that's the necessary part now is actually to change the mind, as we said previously. So that is related to plans, but in this typical field, that's more from the health ministry.
Professor Carly, yes, you can comment on
well, the first point is that 2003, the major heat wave we faced in 2003, was clearly at that time a surprise. That's the first point. And going to the global climate event, it was the first time we had such an important climate event. Heat waves in France had happened. But before that, in 1996, it was a big one. But we have no way of analyzing it, and there was no a large amount of death that will give us the impression that we have to prepare for something bigger. So 2003, I remember perfectly this period. I was already in charge of the EMS in Paris. It was August, the weekend of the 6th to the 8th August. And I decided to replace one of my assistants who has broken an arm in sports. So nobody on duty for the weekend. So I do it. That weekend, 2,500 persons were hospitalized with heat stroke in the Paris area. And before that, I have only 2 points that I know. The first one was heat stroke in the army, because it happens in the army, because when you have exertional heat stroke, that means you are making commando race, and it's clearly something exhausting and with a very hard climate. But that was 1 or 2, 3%. But we know the disease. The second point was it happens like that very brutally at the same moment. And we observed in Paris that we had the first sign we were unable to interpret was elder people with a lot of fever. Infectious disease, obvious. And it has taken us 1 or 2 days to make the relationship between the fact that the temperature was increasing in the city and the fact that elder people are dying of heat stroke at 33 degrees. I remind you that we stay at 43 degrees 2 hours. We are fried like an egg. Your brain is fried and it's finished. We can do anything. It's finished. So we discovered that. We discovered that in 48 hours, and we discovered the fact that, in fact, in Paris, there was an extremely dangerous place that we didn't know, the rooftop. The rooftop in the old buildings of Paris, because if you look at the cover, it's made with zinc, with metal cover, and consequently, it's clearly a place where you concentrate all
Heat.
And in fact, it was so hot that people were dying there. But it's at the 8th floor, the 6th floor, an old building. And the time we discovered the first people killed, there are plenty of others at the same time. So that was a nightmare, but we discovered that. We begin to fight the risk. The first thing was to find ice to make the temperature drop. When we have tried to do that in all the hospitals at the same time, in all the possible places, to find ventilators, to find places where there were air conditioning and so on. But it was clearly at that time improvised. And nobody was aware of the fact that it was not in the few quarters in Paris, it was in fact half of France and probably 1/3 of the Europe at the same time. One of the interesting points was that when we have looked at that, my first feeling, in order to know what to do, was to call people that were living in the south. And physicians, including critical care physicians in the south, told me that it's very hot, but if you have the good prevention measure, it will not kill not a lot of persons. But you have to be protected. And the first point, and that takes us again to the discussion in this meeting, was that we have no prevention. No prevention at all. We are unable to analyze what are the population at risk. We are unable to make this population to be protected. We are unable to give the correct messages to the population. So we have done all that improvised, and consequently, probably we limited the number of deaths, but it was clearly something terrible. And then, afterwards, we decide that it was a national emergency, and we create the special plan that we have now. And this plan is working. There was a couple of people that worked in this plan in the room before that. Who knows? First, we have the indicators. We have the dashboard, meteorological, climate effort are now monitored for all France. Every day at 8 p.m. we see there is an alert or not. That's really important. Second point, we know that we have to immediately strike hard on the population at risk, take them, make them in a safe place, send people home to check that they are there, that they receive all the... And then not only give water. We have killed during the heat wave in Paris more people by giving water than leaving them with the warm.
They drank too much?
Yes, because if you give liters of water to elder people, they will have cardiac failure, and then they have acute hyponatremia, and they are comatose. So it has to be improved. But we have discovered that, unfortunately, several months after, when we analyze all the cases and been through. So in the plan, you know now what to do. We know that this plan has to be national. It has to be clearly, immediately public. It has to be organized and financed all the time. So now we add more heat stroke in France because people probably, they continue to do sport when it's very hot. We have heat stroke, professional heat stroke, because there are people that are exposed to that and it's difficult. But the fact that it will kill a lot of people because we are not aware is no more possible, and that's a great improvement. And we teach that now to all the authorities. And if you consider what happened in France, the fact that our authorities are extremely honest in analyzing the consequences is an important point. Because if you consider what happened in other countries, even in the south of Europe, they have also a lot of death and a lot of consequences. But that was not part of a possibility of public analysis. And in France, we have given a lot of money and invest a lot in our sovereign services of the state. And we were able to say, well, what we have done what we can, but we have the possibility now to improve because we can analyze, and if we can analyze, we can prevent, and so on. So, in fact, heat wave and cardiac arrest is no far away, finally, in terms of consequences, but the fact that climate changes make heat waves more frequent is clearly something that has to be considered, and you have cited heat wave, but we have the floods, which is clearly the sister of the heat wave, and we have also the fact that we can have ice storms. And ice storms, I remind you, I think the captain will agree on that 5 centimeters of snow in the street of big cities in France, even in Paris, is a nightmare.
Interesting. So we understand that France is quite improving, since the heat wave 2003 especially. You're mentioning other causes.
Awareness.
Yes.
We now have the awareness on that, and we have paid that in lives, but it's really important, and it's for the future a major message.
We remember heat waves in Greece, in Spain, with temperatures the past summer close to 50. What about what's happening, in other places in Europe? Are they also progressing on this issue, on prevention? Dr. Casson.
It's very clear that the south of Europe is better prepared with the high temperature, and it's very clear that they are not the same problem compared to France. But again, with the disaster, is exactly the same we said for the domestic area and the cardiac arrest. Again, we have to convince the two extremities of the social scale, and especially to explain to the politics that we can save a lot of money if we are doing prevention for the lay public, because
in the end it's an issue, it's a financial issue, right?
Sure.
Saving lives,
For
less
sure.
pressure on the medical system.
Exactly, and it's very clear that we can save for sure life, and that's the most important, but we can save money. And a professor in US during a congress showed that the prevention for cardiac arrest has a less cost compared to the number of deaths. And it's exactly the same in terms of disaster. It's very clear if we are preparing our population, we will save a lot of money. And that's probably a key element to prepare the citizen and to obtain. And that's the support of the European Union is very clear now, because they understood that this economical aspect is essential. So is very important.
When we see, and let's talk about some other natural disaster like floods, it seems like when you see on television, you know, what's happening on the news, people are lost. They just are overwhelmed and surprised, and they lose, you know, houses, or they have major sinisters. It always seems like it's a surprise for people. And what do you have to say to that?
That's the problem of education, because we can take the example of floods in south of France. When you see the families, they have a first time a flood. So we do. Fortunately, they're alive after the disaster. They try to clean the house. Sometimes they have some money coming from the state, from the insurance, and in fact they put all the things at the same places. The refrigerator will be for the second time
after
at the same
flood.
place,
Okay.
and they will last during the second step of floods. The same things, and perhaps more and more. And I think we must educate the people, because in fact I don't know why, but probably it's not enough to have to be in danger and to see what happened in the house, but few weeks after, few months after, they forbid.
They forget.
Yeah, they forget, and that's terrible. I think that's very impressive, and we need to prepare the citizen for a long time, and it's not easy.
Mercedes, you want to add?
Yes, actually, it's very true, and that happens not only in Europe but everywhere in the world. That people actually that have suffered more than one disaster, they still are not able to evacuate. That's linked also to assurance. It depends of the assurance that you're going to have. There are underdeveloped countries, of course, that the only thing they have, so they're not going to evacuate.
Of course.
Even if they see that the river is flooding, they're not going to evacuate, and I have seen that. So in the States, for example, the United States might be easier because you can see that they have a huge culture of having an assurance, and they're going to have a backup. But what I want to also to say is regarding what we were previously talking about, awareness and awareness campaign and how we're working, actually, and about innovation, what I had said previously too. What we have to use are more pedagogical tools as well. And for example, now we have at the French Red Cross, we have developed real virtuality that actually you're in the moment of flood, and what are you going to do? So you have the first part that how you're going to get prepared for that. So where you have an introduction with a volunteer normally, and they're going to explain you what is an emergency kit. So you have the like 5 minutes to choose what are you going to put in your emergency kit. And it really depends of each person, of course, but you have normally you need to know more or less what you're going to put inside, for example, medicines or important papers or clothes. And then maybe people are going to put some games. So we're trying to explain what is better to put or why you didn't think about that. And then the second part is about how it is the response. So you're at your place and you are seeing that the water is getting inside your house, and the first aid are not yet arrived. So how are you going to act? What are you going to do? So you have different options. Are you going upstairs? Are you going down out? Are you going to take your kids from school? So these are basic measures that we try, because still people are thinking about going to get their kids at school when they already have an emergency plan put in place in school normally. And there's
a natural reaction.
Exactly, that we have to in some kind fight against that and say, okay, my kids are okay at the school right now. I know they have teachers that had been trained for this. So and this is all coming with training, of course, and preparedness, and trying to make awareness about these measures.
So people, when they want to go through this training, it's just volunteers and they can register at the Red Cross? when someone wants to follow one of the training?
I mean, this, for example, the one of the real virtuality, we're using it in conferences. Okay. Well, we developed that during COVID, so we didn't have the chance because of prevention measures. Yes. We couldn't put the kids to everybody. But this, we use it.
Where do you go? You go on public places? Or?
For example, we could do it here. Okay. I mean, we need volunteers to introduce people and to explain how to use it. Then, for example, during the COP26, we can also, or in this international conference or local conference, it depends on our volunteers if they want to use it.
You go outside.
Exactly. Okay. And then, of course,
to the public.
Yeah. Okay. For example, we have also then what we call the summer van. That it was a van that was going around France with volunteers as well, and they were explaining the first aid gesture, what to do, and also how to identify risks and what are natural risks. Because the thing is that we're talking with a vocabulary that is really complex. I mean, we're talking about prevention, preparedness, mitigation, risk, hazard, and all this is scary. Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of scientific and complicated vocabulary for adults, for experts, for everybody. So just imagine like the public in general, or kids. We have to find a way how to adapt all that and put it in everybody's mouth or everybody's vocabulary. Mm-hmm.
I have a question for Mercedes. What about a computer application? I've heard that one has been developed in United States by the American Red Cross that clearly gives you information. You say that you have the risk. You say, oof, there is a tornado or
coming up.
Then it gives you. Can you give us information about it?
I don't know if you're talking about the What Now application. Actually, we're adapting it here in France right now. This is is the International Federation of the Red Cross that came out with this application, and it's that the population is receiving the alert. And there's a platform where we're putting our messages. For example, in different alerts, we can choose the alert. For example, we can follow the national alerts at French level. So we put, for example, for prevention, what we have to do, for preparedness, what we have to do. The thing that for us, for example, what it is response, we really have to respect what civil safety of the Ministry of Interior is saying, because we cannot release the messages we want. We have to follow what the government is giving us. Mm-hmm. And the idea is then that media after can go to this platform and take these messages and are going to release it to the population. I don't know if it's that what you...
Yeah. So it's exactly that, and it's the fact also that people will be connected, and it's far more simple to re-establish connection to internet than to have the possibility to have classical phone lines working and things like that. So consequently, the fact that they receive the alert if something is beginning and they don't know what it is, improve clearly their reaction, and the fact that they can access to information that has been prepared in case of you have this. It clearly gives you what to do. It's probably saving a lot of time because retrieving all this information from internet will not be simple in the middle of the panic, in the middle of everything. Mm-hmm. So clearly I think that using apps or connection is a point that we can have all of us in our cell phone, and being connected to people that can provide information in a worldwide basis, it's clearly an improvement also.
That's interesting also because, not so long ago, we were talking about what do we do if there's a disaster, no matter what it is, natural or attack. We should listen to the radio. Do you have a radio with batteries? Okay, it doesn't exist anymore, so I guess apps are probably more up to date. Professor Botiga, we saw also these impressive footage, videos of what was going on in Western Germany in July, in past July, with big floods. Are German training in that, facing some kind of disaster like that, volunteers?
I mean, I was not really involved in that. I also only have impressions by television and media. about this, and by what we have analyzed within the German Red Cross and all other organizations about that. But maybe this is very comparable to what you have faced in 2003. We faced it with a flood last year, because no one would ever expect something like this in the middle of Germany. I mean, even in 1 hour before that all happened, and 180 or 90 people have died, or maybe more, all the official administration said, don't be afraid, it's heavily raining, but there is no danger coming down. So this was really a surprise and a wake-up call, as maybe the heat wave in 2003 was a wake-up call for France. This is probably a wake-up call for Germany, and maybe also for the whole world, because this is just a symptom of the climate change. And it became very much obvious that all the systems were not able to react perfectly. And the whole communication was broken down immediately. It was not possible to use a cell phone anymore, because all the masts were going down, or the electricity was going down. So there was no electricity, there was no cell phone. The only thing you could do was the radio if you had batteries or so.
That's the limits of this.
And I remember I had received a gift from the German Red Cross, a radio that you can start with some dynamo, or what is the right English word, where you can put your own energy in to be informed. So, I mean, we have not done a good job with this flood, and a lot of people lost their lives. And I mean, all the pictures when houses went down the river, third world impressions.
It seems like there's a gap between people, the conscious developing towards climate changes and individual changes we do in our lives, less, consuming less, being careful with what we do, but we don't make the step of being involved in prevention and being trained for that. Mercedes.
I would like just to add maybe the positive of all of it, and it's also from COVID, and we have seen at the French Red Cross, and also I have example from the German Red Cross, that actually the quantity of volunteer increases.
Okay, so that's that was one of my questions.
Oh, sorry.
So you see people, more and more people knocking at your door.
Yeah, I mean, it happened also after the 2015 terrorist attack in France, that we have seen an increase of volunteers. But the thing now is that, and I come back to my previous word about adapting, is that we have seen that we cannot ask for people to be engaged as a volunteer all the time. So we came up with new forms of engagement. So now we have spontaneous volunteers, we have volunteers for one day, so we have different types of volunteers.
Okay.
And actually during the floods in Germany, they have the German Red Cross, they have created that response teams, that there were people going without any experience at all, with people with experience, so they were making response teams in this way, and doing tasks that anybody can do, like, for example, distributing food or cleaning houses, and that things that anybody can do. We don't need any particular competency on that. And sometimes these people are encouraged to continue being volunteer for the National Society of the Red Cross, or they are just involved in particular activities. So
interesting.
For France, in the case of the French Red Cross, this came with new forms of engagement. So we're engaging people in different ways. If you only have one day, you can intervene only one day. But then we have more the typical tradition volunteers that actually they are really engaged and they're following trainings, and they're also working in or delivering first aid or training courses. And it depends on the people, because each other have different compromise in their life, and we cannot expect to be 24 hours during volunteers activities. So we really have to adapt to that, and I think that's one of the positive things about crisis or COVID. The same. I mean, all the associations that were created, like the neighborhood association, looking for their neighbors, what they need. So this is kind of trying to look the good side of the crisis.
Mm-hmm. Captain Carré, were there volunteers and things organized also on the government level since COVID-19 or since the Paris attacks, for instance?
Just some words before regarding the natural risk, since we were dealing with it. Comparing with the life-saving programs or life-saving gestures I talked about previously, minds are also changing in terms of natural risk in our comparison. And for example, around Nice area, which is an area submitted or exposed to brutal floods, earthquakes also. I know there are a lot of education programs to the population, to the elected authorities also, that are made by the fire department of Alpes-Maritimes. They are very, very engaged in such education programs to the population. So I think also that when I said previously that the way to how can I say it? When I said the prevention in terms of fire safety was changing, that's also the same for natural risks.
Okay, you see progressively...
Yeah, step by step, and especially in the most exposed areas.
And you put more means in that, resources?
The fact is that in terms of firefighters or firefighting activities, the specific things is that there are a fire department in each department. I mean the administrative territory. So they are autonomous in terms of funds. So it really depends from one territory to another one, considering if you have money or not.
Okay.
That's so. Because that is the way how the fire departments are working now as heritage from the past.
Professor Carly, there are more and more volunteers. Do you see that also, people wanting to be involved and committing?
I agree with the Red Cross on the fact that we have to recruit all forms of volunteers. And that will be extremely different than in the past. If we consider what we have organized and works not so bad in France, we have volunteers that have been trained, almost professional. And in most of the French administrative region department, finally, there is a mix between professionals and volunteers, and they work together. However, the level of skills of these volunteers is quite high. And if you consider that they are acting in very dangerous situations, including active fire, it's understandable that they have to be at a top level in terms of safety and in terms of training. Because if they are not, they will be the first victim. That's the point. But if we consider volunteer in a more global way, the possibility to use small part of the act of being volunteers may be extremely useful in a large scale. That's why I think that the possibility to have apps, phone apps, for example, is a way of improving this, let's say, one-day volunteer, 1 hour volunteer, one-time volunteer. But if they are at the right time at the right place and they can do something that may not be very sophisticated, but that can be extremely important in terms of survival, So consequently, I think that we have to use new technologies to develop the fact that if I want to do something, the computer will find what I can do and when I can do it. And consequently, it's create a global way. We have a major risk that we have not discussed a lot, is the fact that we are in France so convinced that the sovereign services of the state are extremely efficient, that many people say, well, I can do nothing. They are so good. I can do nothing. And if we can convince people that if they can give 2 hours, if they can give some food, or if they can call and use the right system to call and things like that, if you summarize all that, it will improve globally the response when we are facing a very dangerous situation for the whole country or something like that. So consequently, I think for the young people it's very important. You will not find easily people that want to work for weeks to be trained and so on. But if you ask them, are you ready to do something? Maybe they are, and they can do something simple. And if they are guided to do it, that's where the technologies will be important. I think it will be some help. And in the future, we have to think about the fact that all the good possibilities must be put together if we want to be more effective.
The good wheels. Dr. Casson, you agree with that?
Yes, exactly. That Pierre said. It's we have done a real communication aspect with the volunteer for one day. It was a decision of the Red Cross to propose to the citizen to be volunteer for one day. Secouriste d'un jour in French, and that's very important because if we want to involve more and more people, probably in normal life they have no time. They have no time to be involved as a volunteer because it takes time. It's necessary to be trained during 40 hours, and probably is too much for the citizen. It's necessary to give them the basic principles, and the basic principle will be, of course, be used by themselves for them and for their family, but also for the whole community, and that's the most important. And probably it's learning solidarity. And during disaster, that's the problem. The first hand who will be with you, it will be probably your neighbor, but not for sure not the emergency service. And that's the most important during disaster, to think about that. Probably the help can come from myself or just from my neighbor, but nobody more. And we have to explain that. We have not we need to explain to the population that they can't wait from the state at this time. We have no possibility. If it is an earthquake, fortunately we have not a lot in Europe, but we have some volcano. Our colleague from Italy has that, and other country has major disaster. So I think we have to work jointly. We have to cross the border, and we have to work together, because if for sure we have experiences from country to other country, and unfortunately. I think this collaboration. Sometimes we are reinventing the wheel. And the will exist sometimes just in another country, and it's necessary to take some good example, to promote prevention, to promote social inclusion, and of course to include all the citizens also, to explain that during disaster it's essential to help people who are blind or people who are handicapped. And it's very, very important for everybody to take that into account and think, oh, a disaster happened or something wrong happened. My neighbor is in running chair. I have to help him or her, and that's very important. So I think it's more a solidarity concept. I think we are able to do that. I think it will be the future of our society, especially in Europe. I think, of course, I hope that in other regions of the globe it will be the same. But I think in Europe with especially the West country, because we are really on the same area. We are on the same disaster zone, and probably if we are thinking all together, we will be more and more involved, more and more efficient, and that's probably the strategy we can have for 2030.
And to the level also of the EU, there should be more collaboration, because there's no tool, no,
Absolutely.
on the European level.
Absolutely. I think at this time we know that we have some tools, and we talk about the first aid app or some app we had. I think it's necessary to share this sort of app. It's not. I think when we have the sort of tool who are very efficient, it's necessary to share that. And because when you develop this sort of application, it's a lot of work, and it's really a pity if another country has to do the same.
Yeah.
And that's the most important. Probably we need a platform, an electronic platform, and sharing competencies to probably to save time and money and human resources. And that's, in case of disaster, it's essential.
Mercedes,
It's Access actually. There are many tools at European level, and last year it has been launched the Knowledge Network. And actually, to do that, before, just an example, before all the European projects, for example, that were financed by DG ECO, that's the director of civil protection and humanitarian aid. Each project that was financed by them has its special website. So it was impossible to find information because you have to go to each specific website. Now all the projects are going to be in this platform, and this is just a little example. I mean, the idea is actually to encourage the transfer and to share the knowledge that is being developed in Europe, and also to encourage the trainees on the fellowships, or sending one trainer from one country to the other one if they are interested in visiting one center or institution. So the platform is already there. It has been launched last year, as I said. And regarding what Professor Carly was saying before, the app of how to gather all these resources, it has been done by the Austrian Red Cross as well. They have one, and here in France we're trying to do the same. It has been actually an innovation from the volunteers of the French Red Cross, and the idea is to gather all the volunteers and to see which are their capacities, because there may be disabled people that are able to do what things, for example, social media, or there are elder people that are good with some stuff. Have also put their capacity or their resources in this database, and they can be triggered when it is needed.
Professor Botiga, maybe one word of conclusion on your end. What would you say?
I would say all what we have said is very important and very right. And education for all this must start in the kindergarten and then in the schools every year, as long as they go to school, and then we will reach our goals in the years to come. So the most important thing is we need to start as early as possible. And here we need the politicians and the ministries to make the laws, and to not only make the laws, but also to implement it into daily practice, so that it is not just the law, but reality in kindergartens and in schools. And that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Captain Carré? Message is passed.
Sorry?
Message has been transferred to you.
Yeah.
Implement the laws.
Yeah, so as concluded word, that's right. Yeah. So military people used to say hard training, easy war. But that's exactly the same for the civil safety. So I think that's Yes, the important point is to work all together. I mean, the authorities, the administrative authorities, and professional and so volunteers, and also, as I said, when I just started, the law from 2004 was to place to make civil safety everyone's business, and that's still the same.
Professor Carli, what is your conclusion?
In order to make a long discussion simple, we have to improve. And obviously, no, we are joking. We outlined the fact that things are changing, that recent experiences, including natural disaster and the COVID and so on, make clearly obvious that we have to work together and that the first link of any process will be the public. So we have to have the public on board from the beginning. And that's true in terms of doing something, but also thinking that they are involved and not only to be associated because they are no more victims, they are actors. So I came back to this point. I think it's really important. And the last point for the conclusion is if we do that together and we add a European dimension, it will be more and more effective than if we try to do that alone. And I think there is no differences in private or public services in that way, in the fact that we are working in an organization or working in a services. Never mind, the only aim is to improve. And obviously, we have a lot of work to do in the future on that. But however, I'm confident on the fact that this recent disaster we have been in front of and a very exceptional situation, indeed, they killed a lot of people. Indeed, we have a lot of money that has been given to that. But we'll have lessons, and it's our job to then take this lesson for a huge improvement and not a small, normal, progressive improvement.
And as Dr. Casson said, go to a European level and, collaborate more with each other. Thank you very much, all of you. We'll take a few minutes for questions from the public, if we have.
Hi, I'm Hadrian. I want to congratulate you for this meeting. Thanks to all of you.
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
Yeah, okay. I speak louder. So I'm Hadrian. I want to be volunteer at the Red Cross. I want to have a training there. I think one thing is missing in France or in Europe. There's no civil service all along your life. This is if you go to Switzerland, for example, you have a military service all your life. So you have you're regularly invited to come, but I think it will be needed to create an European civil service, and all along your life, and we can receive training and things like this.
Dr. Casson, it's for you.
Thank you. No, you're right. You're right. I think it will be important in the future to enlarge the basis of this pyramidal structure of emergency health care, and for that we need a very big first structure is the lay public, and effectively the citizen must be involved on that. Civil involvement is very important, but probably we have to explain to the young people, and because it is the first topic. During the first topic, we talk about schools. We talk about young people. It's very important to educate them as a civilian, as the base of the emergency service. In fact, even we have the best specialists in Europe in emergency. It's very true that we need the citizen. And we have to say, you are the citizen. You must be the first link. And that's probably the reality of our society in the future. If we are on the positive way, but a quick way, because we need effectively, we have not to wait. We have to be active, we have to be proactive to do that, because if we are waiting and waiting, it's like the climate, it will be a disaster. And probably all of us, and we are not a lot here, but if all of us has an action for that, I think we can win, and we can win against probably the big problem we have during domestic and daily accidents and also disaster.
Another question? Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, all of you, for sharing all these interesting and major ideas and concerns. Merci à tous.